Welcome back. It is the season of investor conferences, and among the most watched in this space is the Motilal Oswal Global Investor Conference. First day begins today. Nimesh is there with Rajat Rajgarhia. Rajat, before I hand it over to Nimesh, just a word on this big event over the weekend, the cabinet reshuffle. Is that going to make a big difference to the way you approach stocks?
Hi Lata, good morning. I think this cabinet reshuffle that happened yesterday is a very positive event, and I look at it in two categories. First, the number of people who have worked very actively at different levels in various fields in bureaucracy, who have now been made ministers, bring with them a lot of practical experience. That I think is a very, very wonderful strategy. Secondly, having a full-time defense minister, and that also Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, who herself has done a great job in her earlier ministry, gives a very positive indication that some of these ministries will see a lot more momentum going forward. Moving Mr. Piyush Goyal to railways again creates a lot of new hope. I think most of the changes that have happened very, very positive, and at least markets, investors, economy, all of us are looking forward to a new set of reforms, new set of business momentum from the cabinet reshuffle that happened yesterday.
Rajat, in fact, we spoke about this in the break as well as to how important this whole reshuffle is going to be. Is it going to give you a message that maybe 2019 elections are going to be forwarded, and maybe in 2018 itself you'll see the elections?
I think, Nimish, the message may not be so pertinent relating to a change of the election schedule, but it is more relevant that you have some of the very practical people who have been in the fields, who understand the practicality of various ministries, are now being involved to perform, right? At least we are very excited that many of these names are people who have been performers in their respective fields, and maybe we will see momentum of these respective segments getting better, right?
So will that change the perception for a lot of the investors for sectors like railways and defense? Because there are some players in railways and defense, and now you've got strong leaders there. So is that something which probably investors will latch up now and look to buy?
So investors were quite positive on both defense and railways, even under the earlier ministers, right? But I think whenever a reshuffle happens, right, you can either make it look less positive or more positive. I think this reshuffle makes it look even more positive.
Okay. Coming back to your conference now, I can already see a lot of buzz around. When we last spoke to you last week, almost 800 investors are going to get registered at the conference. What are you, expected to hear from larger investors? What sort of questions do you think they're going to tell you? Because earnings again is bit of a disappointment and a bit of a question mark.
Yeah, so I think there are three important aspects to look at the conference right now. The first is that the divergence between the macro and the micro is pretty high. We are in the best of the macros, but we are still disappointed with the bottom-up earnings growth, right? That bridge needs to be built now. Secondly, investors always look for turnaround stories. This year, one of the biggest performing stocks is Reliance, which after a gap of 10 years has created massive alpha for. Which are the next such sectors? Is pharma going to see some turnaround anytime in the near future? Are the kind of questions that investors are going to look. And the third, the conference has a very large representation of financials.
Correct.
And that has been the bedrock of this upcycle over the last 6, 7, 8 years, right? And we are seeing newer and newer players coming either through IPOs or through new listings or through greater capital raisings, right? How important or how much more is left in this space over the next 1 to 3 years is going to be essentially the focus. All these three things get clubbed very well in the central theme of the conference, which is India Rising.
Correct. I know you've been very bullish on the new sets of banks, so to speak, AU Finance, RBL. We spoke about it last week as well. So I don't want to ask you again because I know you're bullish on that space. The other sector which you track very closely is the autos. That's been your forefront. You've been very bullish on Hero Honda for many, many years now. We saw the auto sales number quite impressive. Do you think they are in a sweet spot now, given that the festive season is going to come over the next 2 months?
Well, I think after a long gap, we have started seeing volume growth for across auto segments turning good. And that had to happen because post many disruptions that we have seen, and they were short-term disruptions over the last 12-18 months, we have seen the demand was being depressed for some time. But as the economy keeps on growing, the rural keeps on getting better, and the government allocates a large part of the budget to a more productive expenses rather than subsidy expenses, that will get reflected back into the consumption story. And consumption in India is no more limited to the traditional FMCG, but autos themselves become a part of the Indian consumption theme. And that's why you are seeing the recent volume numbers of Maruti, Hero MotoCorp, Eicher, all of them looking quite good.
Exports for that has been pretty strong.
And we think this trend will continue for the rest of the year.
Okay. The other sector which, as a house you've been quite bullish on is the OMCs. I know Ramdevji personally holds both HP and BP for a very long time now. Given that, crude has been pretty much soft, given the global environment, do you think this outperformance is going to continue? Because I keep hearing that the margins are going to keep improving for OMCs over the next couple of years.
So, when business franchisees which have very little competition come out of a very prolonged depressed period, right? Valuations keep making new highs and new themes keep emerging to play them, right? At some point, OMCs were value plays, then they became growth plays. You saw petrol diesel reform, then you saw LPG kerosene reform. Now you are seeing consolidation reform. I think given the sweet spot of businesses they are in, given the improvement in the balance sheet that we are seeing, and I also want to mention that while the domestic investors are very well allocated, FIIs generally are still not as much allocated to these OMCs as they should be. I still see a lot more room to make money in them. You may have intermittent periods of volatility, but the uptrend in these stocks will continue till the time they deliver strong cash flows as what they are doing now.
Rajat, the other big element which has supported the market is the domestic flows. Even the way the number of domestic investors have registered at a conference this year, it clearly shows the enthusiasm is there and the flows are backing them in terms of local people who are putting in money to mutual funds. Is that a big structural shift which is going to continue for a longer period of time?
Well, I must tell you that you will get answer to this question in tomorrow's panel at 11 a.m.
Correct.
Where the theme of the panel is financialization of India savings. We have the CEOs of the two largest mutual funds of India, and we have two of the biggest distributors who are going to come and share what are they seeing at their end customer level. But if you ask my view, I think while we are excited about the $1.5 billion monthly flows that we are seeing, when you compare with the overall pool of savings that we have in the economy, right, this is just a drop in the ocean. We still have to see a lot more momentum in the years to come.
I want to specifically ask you about the housing finance companies. The reason being, Motilal itself has a housing finance company as a subsidiary which has done phenomenally well, and that's a space where you are also bullish on. Do you think the bullishness is justified given that there are some risk of slippages now in the housing finance services as well?
So, if you look at this space over the last 10-20 years, right from the most premium company of HDFC to entities run by PSUs and the new ones who have joined over the last 10 years, almost everyone has clocked a 20 to 25% growth with ROEs of 18 to 20%.
Okay, Motilal Oswal's 13th annual global conference called Rising India. We'll keep getting you more and more expert voices from that through the day. But for now, it's time to get a quick check on all the action from the commodity and the currency space.